The Chicago Bulls are under 500 for the first time this season as they fall to the Indiana Pacers 103-101. We're going to be talking about the key takeaways from tonight's loss. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Buzelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about the key takeaways from tonight's loss against the Indiana Pacers. And so starting with how this game ended, this game came down to the final seconds as the Chicago Bulls and the Indiana Pacers were tied up. The Pacers had the basketball, and Pascal Siakam had it at the top of the three-point line. He would dribble over to his right, get to the mid-range jumper, and he would knock it down over Modest Buzelis and Tre Jones, and that would give the Indiana Pacers the go-ahead basket over the Chicago Bulls. Tre Jones would have a full court heave that did not go in, and that's how the game ended. And so this literally came down to the last seconds as the Chicago Bulls were tied with the Indiana Pacers. And so that's how the game ended. Now I wanted to go ahead and jump into the points that really described what we saw in this game. And so the first one being that the Indiana Pacers got off to a hot start, or should I say Jay Huff got off to a hot start. And so their center came out and scored 14 points. He did not score again in this game. And the one thing that people are not talking about with Jay Huff's performance is that he did a great job as far as providing rim protection for the Indiana Pacers. I think that he got some timely blocks really for the Indiana Pacers that helped them, kind of turn the Bulls back there. And so I think that he did a great job there. But because he got off to a good start offensively, I think that the Pacers really got off to some good momentum early on. And that really had the Bulls chasing throughout this game. And so you have to give the Pacers a lot of credit because they never got flustered, even though the Chicago Bulls would tie the game up, even though they would eventually take the lead. The Pacers never quit. They stayed with what they were doing, and eventually they got it to where they got basically the final possession, and they went ahead and they won the game there. And so, to go along with that point, I think that there were several other things that were happening to the Chicago Bulls that really has been happening, as they've been losing some games. And so, talking about the defensive lapses, like I think that there were definitely some lapses there on defense throughout this game where there was like slow rotations and stuff like that the Bulls were missing. And so the Pacers were able to knock down shots. And then also too, it was like timely second chance opportunities that the Pacers were getting. And so it wasn't like, they were just dominating the Bulls, but it was just these timely possessions where the Bulls needed to get the stop. They needed to get the board or whatever the case may be. And they just weren't able to do it. And then when it came down to clutch time, when they needed to execute the most, this team was not able to get it done. And so a tough loss for the Chicago Bulls to lose like this in the final seconds. And so the second point that describes this game is that this was a game of runs. This was very much a back and forth type of game because in the first quarter, the Bulls had a 12-2 run to go ahead and take the lead. And then in the second quarter, you had the Pacers really get a good run, and that put them up by 10 points. And then later on, the Bulls would come back with an 11-1 run to make it 41-40 with the Pacers leading there. Then in the third quarter, it was a 7-0 run for the Bulls to make it 61-59. And then in the fourth quarter, the Bulls would go on a 10-0 run to go ahead and tie it up at 86. And then the Bulls would go on to take the lead. But then that's where the Pacers were able to go on a run of their own. Eventually, they would end up winning the game. And then also, too, during that stretch, it was a tough offensive stretch for the Chicago Bulls as they were unable to execute and just really, get some baskets and things that they needed down the stretch in this game. And so, again, a tough loss here for the Chicago Bulls. And so now I want to go ahead and jump into the individual performers today. And so there were three players that I think stood out for the Chicago Bulls, and we will talk about everybody here. And so, not in any particular order, but the first player that stood out to me was Josh Giddey. And so I thought that Josh Giddey really got off to a great start because I think that he got off to a quick 12-point start in this game. And his first shot he knocked down was a 3-point shot. And then he had a tough layup at the basket as well. And so you could tell that he was certainly locked in. One of his highlights today was when he went baseline and he essentially went from the corner to the other corner at the 3-point line. So he went from the right all the way to the left. And as he was going over to the left side of the floor, he gives like a little hesitation fake and kind of lifts the defense for a moment. And then he dribbles all the way over to the left corner of the 3-point line. Nobody comes out to meet him, and then he knocks down a 3-point shot. So you could tell that Josh Giddey was certainly locked in on the offensive end. And then on top of that, man, he had some good finds in this game. And so I thought that, he hit like Ayo Dosunmu into some good places where he was able to knock down some 3-point shots. When Kevin Huerter started to get it going in the third quarter, he definitely got him open on a nice pass or so. And so, just finding teammates and making the game easy. And that's definitely what Josh Giddey can do. And then the points in the paint, at one time, I believe he had 10 of the 26 points with the points in the paint for the Chicago Bulls. And so his stat line today, again, was solid. And so you see that Josh Giddey had 17 points, +7 in the plus-minus box score. He did have 3 turnovers in this game. He had 11 rebounds, 10 of those defensive rebounds. And so once again, doing a great job as far as getting the defensive rebounds for the team. Also, too, he was 1 of 4 from the free throw line, and so he left some money there. He was 2 of 5 from deep and 7 of 13 from the field in 34 minutes. And so just like the way that Josh Giddey attacked the game tonight. And so the next player that stood out for me was Tre Jones. And so I thought that Tre Jones was terrific off the bench because I think that he put a lot of pressure on the rim. And so he had 17 points, a +6 in the plus-minus box score. He did have 2 turnovers. He had 2 assists. He had 1 rebound. He was 3 of 3 from the free throw line and 7 of 9 from the field. And so you can just tell, just with the pace and the plays that Tre Jones was making out there, it was the stuff that they needed off the bench. And I just think that Tre Jones, again, I just love how he gets crafty inside with the finishes and things like that. And also, too, the way that he is able to draw fouls and things like that. And so I like the fact that he went over to challenge Pascal Siakam with Modest Buzelis. I would have liked to see him go a little bit early, because he has certainly shown defensively that he can get steals and stuff like that. And so who knows what would have happened if he would have ran at Pascal Siakam early and they would have forced an early double team there. So, it's unfortunate the game ended that way, but still not to take anything away from Tre Jones and his performance today. I thought that, again, he was solid off the bench for the Chicago Bulls. And so the next player that I think stood out for the Bulls was Ayo Dosunmu. And so Ayo Dosunmu tonight, 15 points. You see that he was -1 in the plus-minus box score. And so that was the second best plus-minus of the starters tonight. And so he did have 3 personal fouls. He had 1 turnover, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, and he was 0 of 1 from the free throw line, 3 of 6 from downtown, and 6 of 13 from the field in 35 minutes. And so with Ayo Dosunmu, what I loved about his game tonight is that he had some terrific backdoor cuts. And so 2 of the 3 backdoor cuts that he had, those led to some great scores. One of them led to an and one in which he missed the free throw. And so that's where you see the 0 of 1 for him tonight at the free throw line. And so the Bulls could have took the lead right there. And so I believe that's when it was like 86-86. And so, again, I just loved his off-ball movement. One of the plays, he almost made it. I think that's where either Jay Huff or maybe it was Pascal Siakam kind of met him at the rim. And so that just kind of goes into what the Pacers were doing with their rim protection. But I also like the fact that he's knocking down 3-point shots. And so what was mentioned throughout the broadcast is that he is actually 5th in the league in 3-point shooting. And I believe that they were referring to the percentage because Ayo Dosunmu is getting it done. And so I'm just glad to see that he has come back like he has this season. He talked about being hungry. He talked about being locked in. Ayo Dosunmu certainly has. And so he was the 3rd player that stood out for us. And so next, just talking about the rest of the players here and starting with Nikola Vucevic tonight. And so with Nikola Vucevic, 16 points tonight. He was a -7 in the plus minus box score. He had 6 assists. He had 8 rebounds. He was 4 of 4 from the free throw line and 2 of 5 from deep and 5 of 14 from the field. And so, I think with Vooch tonight, the one thing that I did like with him is that he was actually trying to get to the post. And I think that really there were times where I think if the Bulls just would have been a little bit more patient and just let him repost, that could have helped them, because there were times where Vooch was really getting some good passes out of the post, and he was actually helping the team really pay for his post position. But I think that the Bulls kind of went away from that. And then late in the game, Vooch, he struggled. He had just this kind of turnaround that he kind of rushed, and that kind of led to, just a miss late in the game. And then also too, he had a bad 3-point shot that I believe that didn't touch iron. And so it might've been an air ball there. And so it was a tough stretch down the fourth quarter for Vooch in this game tonight. But he did get off to a little bit of a hot start. He did have 5 early points in this game. And at one point, he was leading the Bulls in assists tonight because, like I said, he was doing a great job as far as getting, just good post position and then finding people on cuts and stuff like that. But just a tough finish for Vooch down the stretch. And so next, talking about Modest Buzelis. And so with Modest Buzelis tonight, what I did like about his game was the activity. And so the activity was absolutely there for Modest Buzelis. He had 11 rebounds. He scored 8 points. He was a -12 in the plus minus box score. He did have 3 blocks. He had 1 steal. He was 2 of 5 from downtown and 3 of 9 from the field. And so great activity on the boards for Modest Buzelis. What I didn't like with him is that once again, it seems like that he was settling for a lot of 3-point shots. I just wanted to see him kind of put the ball on the deck and just go at the basket a little bit more. He's been struggling a little bit offensively here. So one of the things that was mentioned is that, over his last 5 games, he's averaging under 10 points. So I couldn't get that out. But, he struggled offensively here. And so that's the thing with Modest Buzelis. And not to take anything away here from his sophomore season, he's working out there. He's trying. He's certainly having a lot better statistical year than he had his rookie season. But there's going to be some ups and downs. And right now it's been a tough patch for him. I did like the fact, again, that there were several other things that he did, especially with the block shots and stuff like that. In fact, he actually hit a milestone with that because he got to his 100th career block shot there. So he's got 100 career block shots right now. And so congratulations to Modest Buzelis for getting that done. And so next, Kevin Huerter. And so with Kevin Huerter tonight, look, you're talking about a player that was struggling as well coming into this one. And so what was mentioned with him, he was 7 of 30 from downtown coming into this game. And so Kevin Huerter had been struggling, and then he was able to knock down a shot. And I think that really for him, he really started to get things going in the third quarter in the second half. That's where he really came on. And so he had 15 points. He was a -7 in the plus minus box score. He did have 4 personal fouls. He had 2 turnovers. He had 1 steal. He had 1 assist. He had 3 rebounds. He didn't get to the free throw line. He was 3 of 8 from downtown and 6 of 14 from the field. And so I think that the one shot that kind of got Kevin Huerter going was there was this 3-point shot where the shot clock was winding down and he was on the move and he just threw it up and it went in. And I think from that point on in the third quarter, that's where he really started to go to work, because after that, he knocked down another 3-point shot and he just really got hot in the second half. He started to get downhill. He was getting that little runner that he has and everything else. And so you could see that Kevin Huerter really started to wake up once he hit that wild 3-point shot. So whatever that was, hopefully Kevin Huerter can keep that and continue on, because he got hot at the end of the game. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into just now the bench and take a look at those performers tonight. And so starting with Patrick Williams tonight. So with Patrick Williams, he really struggled in this game. And so with Patrick Williams, I thought that he was just not that aggressive to me. Again, I thought that he was a little bit passive out there. And then also too, missed opportunities for Patrick Williams, because there was one play where he's coming down the lane for a dunk and he absolutely, I thought he missed it. I mean, they said that maybe there was a block shot credited there, but it seemed like he fumbled it away and missed the dunk. And so I think that they gave Pascal Siakam the block. And then also, too, there was like one play where, and this kind of goes into the hesitation part that I'm talking about. He kind of got free for a mid-range shot, and instead of him releasing it at the very top of his jump, he kind of held in the air a little bit long, and then he waited and then shot it, and it turned into a miss there. And so just, the confidence to just rise up and take the shot, I think that he probably could have hit that bucket there. But 2 points, a -6 in the plus-minus box score, 2 rebounds today, 17 minutes, and he was 1 of 7 from the field. Next up, you see that Emanuel Miller got into the game. And so, the Bulls were shorthanded. They didn't have several players in this game. And so Emanuel Miller got a chance to play in this game. And what I loved about Emanuel Miller is that he didn't have any hesitation. Like his first 3-point shot, he took it and he knocked it down. His next shot, he came down. And when he got his opportunity, he knocked it down. And I just like the fact that he guarded pretty well. I thought that he did a great job as far as going out there and guarding Pascal Siakam. And then also, too, just knocking down the 3 ball from Josh Giddey, because Josh Giddey hit him with a nice pass and he was ready to go ahead and knock it down. He did get to the free throw line as well. And if you've got a chance to look at the Windy City Bulls, look, he's been playing solid out there along with Lachlan Olbrich and then also to Noah Asingay, which we're going to talk about that in a moment. And so in tonight's game, 6 points, a +8 in the plus-minus box score. He did have a steal. He was 1 of 2 from the free throw line, 1 of 1 from downtown, and 2 of 3 from the field in 7 minutes. And so next, talking about Lachlan Olbrich. And so Lachlan Olbrich, 2 points, +15 in the plus-minus box score. He did have 2 personal fouls. He had a turnover. He had 3 rebounds, and he was 0 of 1 from deep and 1 of 3 from the field in 11 minutes. And so I liked what I saw from Lachlan Olbrich today. And I think that really Lachlan Olbrich provided just the type of energy and effort that you want to see. And so I thought that he was terrific with a good contest on Pascal Siakam for 3 at the top of the key. He also did a great job as far as coming out and screening, because one of his screens was like a little brush screen that led to Tre Jones getting a layup. And also, to his first shot attempt was a solid shot attempt. It was like a little hook shot at the rim and he missed it, but still, I like the presence of mind to take that shot. And then next, talking about his closeouts, there was one possession in the game where he closed out twice on shooters and he did not foul. He stayed on his feet. He was able to, go ahead and make the contact with the offensive player and not foul. And so he did a great job, I think, as far as using his body and shielding the basket and everything else. And so he did a great job there. He also did a great job as far as boxing out. And so I thought that was another thing that he did. And then the one play that he did score on, and so it was his first official score in the NBA. It was a nice little slip on the baseline back there. And so, it looked like the defender was right there for a second. I believe it was Jay Huff. And next thing you know, he went to baseline and Josh Giddey went ahead and threw it there on the baseline. He was able to get to the layup. And there were several other opportunities that I think that Lachlan Olbrich should have had on the offensive end. And so I'm not saying that he necessarily takes the shots, but I thought that he did a great job as far as moving around and being available. I think that he should have certainly got the ball a little bit more. I'm not saying that that's going to help the Bulls, but I was very impressed with Lachlan Olbrich and Emanuel Miller in their efforts tonight. And so next, Jevon Carter, he did knock down a 3-point shot. He was -13 in the plus-minus box score. Just really couldn't get things going. 1 turnover, 2 assists. He didn't make it to the free throw line, 1 of 2 from deep and 1 of 2 from the field in 11 minutes. And we talked about Tre Jones here. And so again, just a short-handed team for the Chicago Bulls. That's why you see, these players come into the game. If you're wondering why there was no Noah Asingay. Noah Asingay was injured. I believe he's dealing with a shoulder issue. And so that's why he was not out there in today's game. And so, these players got a chance to run. I think that this was a game in which you probably would have saw, I think, Noah Asingay in this game, because this was the perfect opportunity for him to get some minutes with no Isaac Okoro. It was no Julian Phillips. It was no Dalen Terry. It was no Kobe White. And it was no Jalen Smith tonight. And so that is why the Bulls were shorthanded. And so now I wanted to go ahead and jump into the team box score and take a look at just some of the bigger stats that came out of that one. And so the first one being that the Chicago Bulls, they did win in the bench scoring there. It was a slight advantage for the Chicago Bulls. And I think that was kind of telling because the Bulls generally have been dominating there. And so they won that 30-26 with bench scores tonight. And so the next key box score number that kind of jumps out here is just going to be the field goal percentage. And so you see that the Bulls did a solid job with shooting the basketball. And so they shot 45% in this one. And so 39 of 87, 45%. Then you see that the Pacers here were 41 of 89 in this one, 46%. And then the three-point shooting, 41% for the Chicago Bulls. And so I think that they really got hot in the second half. And so 14 of 34, 41% for the Bulls, 32% for the Pacers, 9 of 16 from the free throw line. And so that is a huge stat because in a game that was so tight and the way that it was with these back and forth, lead changes, ties, and everything else, those points right there were valuable, and the Bulls left them at the line. And so 9 of 16 tonight did not take care of business, just 56%. You see that the Pacers were 8 of 11, 73%. And I think that there were a lot of missed calls in this game. And so the refs really let these guys play. And so that was tough here for the Bulls, in a game where you had 6 ties and 14 lead changes. That could have been the difference. Assists tied 24-24. The Bulls are generally a pretty good, assist team, actually one of the better teams in the league. And then the steals, the Pacers 8-5 there. And then the block shots 10-3. And so that goes into my first point, with Jay Huff. And then also too, Pascal Siakam and just really the length that the Pacers have, because, I think a lot of people look at the Pacers record and they say, okay, this is a very bad basketball team. And yes, they've struggled. They don't have Halliburton out there, but still they do compete on the defensive end. And so I thought that showed as far as their rim protection tonight with the block shots and things like that. The turnovers even. And so 13-13, the Bulls actually got more points off of the Pacers turnovers. And so you see that was 12-9. Fast break points. The Bulls were getting into their game. I thought that there were a ton of transition opportunities. And so 23-8 there. And then the points in the paint, the Bulls were able to beat the Pacers 40-36. Talked about how Josh Giddey was able to get downhill. And there were several other Bulls that were able to get into the paint as well. And then next, when you look at the leads here, and so 11 was the biggest lead for the Indiana Pacers, 7 for the Chicago Bulls. I think that for most of this game, the Pacers led in this game. I think it was like 30-plus minutes where the Pacers led in this game. I think the Bulls only led for like 5 minutes or so in this game. And so that just kind of paints the picture a little bit more as to really, how the Pacers were able to hold off the Bulls and just really take it down to clutch time. And so that's another thing too as well. 13 clutch games for the Bulls. Generally, they have been good. This is another game in which they lose. And so a tough loss for the Chicago Bulls as they are under 500. They have a lot of questions now that they will need to answer about this roster, because if this continues, you have to wonder, is a major shakeup coming, especially with so many players being out. And then also too, the Bulls now having to really take a look at some of these players that have been sitting on the bench or in your G League and just really evaluating what is the direction of this team. And so we'll be talking about that a little bit more on the next video, but you guys let me know in the comments here what your key takeaways are from tonight's loss. Again, this is a very tough one for the Chicago Bulls because they had it. They were up by 7. They were really getting some momentum, and then they went cold. And then the Pacers were able to get that final run and they were able to tie it up. And then they got that last second from Pascal Siakam in the last second shot there. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, look, go Bulls. And I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.